How does a space shuttle, the most recognizable spacecraft ever built, end up rotting inside a sealed hangar that the world forgot? The heat shield tiles are falling off like dead skin, the flight deck frozen in time since a mission that never happened. A restoration crew in orange vests just got the keys to a condemned aerospace warehouse. When they cut through the security locks and saw what was waiting for them, they realized they had stumbled onto a secret that could rewrite space history. This is the story of the impossible restoration. William leases condemned hangars. He opened one in the Mojave and found a space shuttle buried in dust. No NASA file mentions this orbiter ever existed. Its computer shows a mission that never flew. The heat tiles are disintegrating into silica dust. His crew has days to seal the hangar before the air becomes lethal. William has been buying condemned aerospace warehouses for 12 years. He found this one on a government surplus listing with no photos, no floor plan, just a warning that the roof might collapse. The hangar sits at the end of a dead access road on an abandoned Air Force auxiliary field in the Mojave Desert. When he cut the rusted padlock and pushed open the steel door, a wall of hot air carrying microscopic glass fibers hit him in the face. That was the heat shield tiles disintegrating. The orbiter filled the entire hangar. 122 feet long, 60 feet tall, wingspan of 78 feet, exactly like the shuttle you know from every textbook. Except this one does not exist in any NASA registry. The serial number plate on the forward landing gear door reads OV-203. Every operational orbiter was accounted for. Enterprise was OV-101. Columbia was 102. Challenger was 099. Discovery was 103. Atlantis was 104. Endeavour was 105. There is no 203 in the official record. This vehicle was built and hidden. Jennifer is the team's aerospace engineer. She worked on the thermal protection system refurbishment for Discovery before the program ended. She walked under the belly and immediately saw the problem. Out of 24,000 heat shield tiles, roughly 40% were severely degraded. The silica fibers were turning back to dust, releasing particles so fine they behave like asbestos in the lungs. The crew had to wear full-face respirators from the first minute, but the flight deck was the real-time capsule. They climbed the access ladder, powered up the auxiliary power unit with a portable generator, and the instrument panels lit up. The multifunction displays still worked. The mission clock showed a launch countdown that never reached zero. And the mission designation displayed on the navigation screen did not correspond to any known shuttle flight, not even the classified Department of Defense missions from the early 80s. This was something else entirely. William had a choice. Call the NASA Office of Inspector General and watch government investigators seal the hangar forever, or restore the orbiter himself and force the truth into the open. He chose the second option. But to do that, they first had to stop the orbiter from killing them with its own decaying skin. The first 48 hours were spent on environmental containment. The hangar had no functioning ventilation. Every footstep kicked up clouds of silica microfibers. The crew brought in industrial negative pressure scrubbers and sealed off the bay with plastic sheeting, turning the hangar into a makeshift cleanroom in reverse. The objective was simple on paper: stop breathing poison. In practice, it meant living inside a building that was actively killing you while you tried to save a machine most of the world never knew existed. Jennifer took a sample of a tile that had already fallen and ran it through a portable X-ray fluorescence analyzer. The composition came back as 99.8% amorphous silica fiber, with a trace mixture of aluminum oxide and boron nitride. That matches the original Li-900 material developed by Lockheed almost 50 years ago. But knowing the recipe and recreating it are two different things. The original manufacturing required a high-purity silica sand sourced from a single mine in Georgia. That mine closed in 1998. Jennifer called 4 former Rockwell suppliers before she found one that had stockpiled raw silica slurry. She drove 300 miles to pick up 5 barrels of a white paste that looked like ceramic yogurt. Back in the hangar, The team jury-rigged a sintering kiln from salvaged insulation bricks and heating elements. The first batch of tiles came out cracked. The second crumbled during cooling. Jennifer realized the firing cycle had to mimic the original process exactly. Ramp up to 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit over 6 hours, hold for 4, then cool at precisely 2 degrees per minute. It took 11 attempts. When the 12th tile finally came out with the correct density, she pressed a blowtorch against its surface for 30 seconds. The center of the tile remained cool to the touch. That is what makes these tiles so remarkable. You can hold a cube of Space Shuttle heat shield that is glowing white-hot on one side with your bare hand on the other. With the recipe locked, the real work began. 9,600 belly tiles needed replacement. Each tile was unique, cut to fit a specific coordinate on the orbiter's underside. They had no CNC machine. Every tile was shaped by hand with a diamond blade and measured against a paper template copied from the original TPS layout Jennifer had saved from her discovery days. 4 people working 16-hour shifts could replace roughly 80 tiles per day. The math was punishing. At that rate, with cure times and curing adhesives, they were looking at 4 months on the belly alone. But on the 3rd week, a routine perimeter check changed everything. One of the crew spotted fresh tire tracks at the far end of the access road. They weren't from Williams' truck, and they didn't come from any of the team. The tracks stopped at a ridge overlooking the hangar, where the ground had been flattened by someone standing there for an extended time. Whoever it was had a clear sightline to the hangar doors and the shuttle inside. William doubled the watch rotation. He also made a critical call to a computer systems specialist named Marcus, who was already on standby. If someone was watching them, they needed to know why this orbiter was hidden faster than they were legally permitted to be there. Marcus was supposed to arrive in 2 weeks. Jennifer told William to get him there in 48 hours, because the payload bay doors were now unsealed, and what the team had just pulled from the bay left no room for caution anymore. The crane rig in the hangar was still operational. With the payload bay doors pried open manually, they lowered a camera on a cable. The bay was not empty like they had expected. Mounted to the keel bridge was a sealed aluminum canister roughly 8 feet long. No NASA tag, no DoD stencil, just a single stamp on the side engraved in Cyrillic. The writing translated to Property of Energy Rocket and Space Corporation, Baikonur Cosmodrome. And at the forward end of the canister, a tiny green LED was still blinking. Marcus arrived at dawn, a reinforced transport case strapped into the passenger seat beside him. Inside were a shielded glove box, a Geiger counter, and a portable clean booth system designed for decommissioning Soviet-era space hardware. When he saw the Cyrillic stamping on the canister, his face went slack. He had worked this kind of hardware before. Government contracts, dark retrieval teams, the things nobody puts on a resume. The green LED was not a simple status light. It was a power indicator for an internal radioisotope thermoelectric generator. The canister was powered by a slug of plutonium-238, the same material that fuels deep space probes. It had been blinking for decades and would keep blinking for 80 years more. Moving it required protocols they could only approximate. Marcus set up the clean booth inside the payload bay, the crew running a chain of decontamination wipes and radiation badges. The Geiger counter ticked up to 3 times background when they lifted the canister free, but it stayed within the safe zone as long as the shielding held. They transferred it to a containment case lined with boron and lead foil. Only then did Marcus crack the end cap. Inside the canister, suspended in an oxygen-free argon atmosphere, sat a magnesium alloy data core the size of a shoebox, wrapped in Captain tape and stamped with dual-language mission designations. English on one side, Joint Orbital Test Article Prometheus. Cyrillic on the other, P700Z. Jennifer translated the Russian aloud. Zarya, Dawn, the name of a Soviet program that was officially canceled in 1987, but this hardware was pristine. Marcus interfaced the core with his portable forensic reader, and what emerged rewrote the history of human spaceflight. The core contained a complete mission manifest, video logs, and a signed diplomatic annex between NASA and the Soviet Ministry of General Machine Building. The agreement, dated October 16, 1985, authorized a joint shuttle mission to dock with a Soviet Salyut-class station, equipped with an experimental laser calibration system. The orbiter would carry a downlink relay that could make Soviet spy satellites blind for a window of 30 minutes per orbit. It was a peacekeeping demonstration disguised as scientific cooperation, and it was real. The launch was scheduled for November of 1986, then Challenger exploded. The political will to fly a secret joint military mission evaporated overnight. The orbiter was already built, the hardware already integrated, but cancellation meant exposure. So they buried it. They wiped the serial number from every database, sealed the hangar under a classified Annex IV designation, and walked away. The hangar stayed off every property record for 38 years, until a routine disposal auction finally listed it as a condemned warehouse with no description. But the data core wasn't just a history book. It contained a beacon log. The green LED was not just a power indicator. It was transmitting a low-frequency handshake signal. And the log showed that signal had been detected and acknowledged by a receiving station 3 weeks before William cut the padlock. The morning after Marcus decrypted the log, 2 black SUVs with government plates parked at the end of the access road. The people who had been watching now introduced themselves. They were polite, professional, and completely uninterested in negotiation. They identified themselves as Department of Energy Nuclear Recovery Specialists acting on an interagency mandate. They knew about the RTG. They knew about the core. They gave the crew 24 hours to vacate and promised that anyone who spoke publicly would face charges under the Atomic Energy Act. William asked them one question: why now? The lead agent looked at the blinking containment case and said something William would replay in his head for months: because you turned it on. The signal wasn't local anymore. A Russian station in Kazakhstan had confirmed the handshake. The other side now knew Prometheus still existed. The clock had just gone orbital. The SUVs left. The crew had 24 hours. William looked at the orbiter, at the 9,000 new tiles now fully cured on its belly, at the intact flight deck with its live countdown display for a mission that never flew. He made the call that would turn a salvage operation into a confrontation with 2 governments. They were not going to hide this thing again. They were going to roll it out of that hangar, stand it vertical against a desert sky, and let the whole world see what nobody was ever supposed to find. They weren't going to launch it. They were going to make it impossible to bury. William's crew did not sleep that night. They operated in 18-minute sprint cycles, a pace borrowed from EVA timelines. The hangar's original rail system still functioned, the massive steel tracks that once moved the orbiter from integration cell to transport platform. Jennifer rewired the hydraulic pumps, while Marcus and 2 others rigged the orbiter's mounting points to a mobile launch platform that had been rusting in the adjacent bay since the Gemini program. At 4 in the morning, the hangar doors rolled open for the first time in 38 years, and the Mojave wind rushed in like a held breath released. The orbiter emerged under its own weight, towed by a pair of diesel tractors, its black and white silhouette cutting against a sky turning indigo at the edge of dawn. They had mapped a route to Complex 12, a decommissioned Titan test stand 3 miles down the abandoned runway. The concrete was cracked but level. The crawler moved at half a mile per hour. By sunrise, the orbiter was in transit, a ghost ship gliding across the desert floor with no announcement, no press, just the desert silence and the distant whine of the tractors in low gear. Marcus uploaded the core data to a distributed server with a timed release trigger. If they were intercepted, everything went public automatically. He set the trigger for 60 minutes, and then he called a photographer from the Los Angeles Times who had broken the Soviet shuttle salvage story a decade earlier. He told her to be at Complex 12 by 10 in the morning with a satellite uplink. The Department of Energy team returned at 9, followed by 2 unmarked helicopters and a mobile electronic warfare unit. They parked at the access road and advanced on foot, their orders clear: stopped the rollout before the orbiter reached vertical. But by the time they covered the 3 miles, the crawler was already inside the pad perimeter. Jennifer had the launch tower gantry cranes rigged and ready. She had spent years prepping Discovery before retirement, knew the lift points by memory. The forward and aft attach fittings took the cables, and the crane operator she had hired from a local steel mill began the lift. The orbiter rose inch by inch as the agents arrived at the pad gate with a court order and no way to enforce it without causing an international incident on live stream. The photographer was already broadcasting. 4 hours later, OV-203 stood vertical against a clean desert sky. The full systems live checkout was underway. The auxiliary power units hummed, the hydraulic rudder speed brake deployed, the payload bay doors opened to the sun. On the flight deck, Marcus booted the navigation computer one final time. The mission clock, frozen for decades, now showed a new countdown. It was not the original launch count, it was a receiving sequence. The Russian station at Baikonur had transmitted a data burst the moment the orbiter achieved vertical. The translation appeared on the center screen, a string of text that silenced the flight deck. It read, "Prometheus acknowledged, Zarya remembers, welcome home." Both sides had been waiting, and neither government could bury it now. The message from Baikonur was not a threat. It was an acknowledgement that a 38-year silence had been broken, and that the orbiter they had just raised to the sky was never truly forgotten by the people who built it. William and his crew did not steal a state secret. They salvaged a piece of buried history that two governments had agreed never to discuss, and by making it visible, they changed the conversation from containment to recognition. OV-203 now stands as a monument to what happens when political fear buries scientific cooperation. The world knows it exists. The tether between the Mojave Desert and the Kazakh steppe is live, and for the first time since the Cold War, there is no hiding the fact that the Space Shuttle program had a ghost twin. The question that remains is not what else is out there. It is whether we are ready to look. If this story means something to you, share it. If you want to be there when the next hangar door opens, subscribe to the channel. We are just getting started. See you in the next one.